So how do people attach to each other anyway? Well, there are a few basic attachment dynamics that are instinctive to us. The first way that we attach, the most basic and the most primitive and the most long-lasting one, is attaching through the senses. That means you want to physically be with the people that you're connecting to. You want to see them, hear them, touch them. And that's throughout all our lives. We want to still be held and hugged and so on. But the infant has no other way of attaching. The only way that the young infant can attach is through the senses. So when a kid is crying at night, it's because he wants to be picked up, because he needs that contact. Now, there's a man called Ferber, a doctor in Boston, who runs something called the Infant Sleep Disorders Clinic. Now, who knew that infants had sleep disorders? And they don't. What's really going on is that parents have to go to work in the morning, and it's inconvenient and a hassle when a kid keeps them up at night. And their lives are so stressed and busy already, they just want to, it's so difficult looking after kids, they just want to have a good night's sleep. The method is not called Ferberization. Here's what Ferberization consists of. And I used to advise this to my patients until I knew better. You let that baby cry for 5 minutes. Well, you make sure that they're not dirty or hungry and so on. But if you've reassured yourself about that, then you let them cry for 5 minutes, and you go in and you say, "Hi, baby, here I am," and so on. Just, you're not abandoned. And then you go out for 5 minutes, and you come back 5 minutes later. And you come in every 5 minutes for the first night, till he goes to sleep. The second night, you extend that absence to about 7.5 minutes. The third night, maybe to 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, and then so on. By the fourth or fifth night, that child will be sleeping through the night. And you think you've trained him how to sleep. So the method is to ignore the child's need for contact. That's the only way he can attach. Yeah, you got him to sleep through the night. What else have you done? What have you taught the kid? Our assumptions about the world and how we perceive the world and how we perceive relationships are actually based on our earliest experiences. The child has no recollection at age 15 or age 25 that he was allowed to cry without being picked up, because the structures in the brain that you recollect with aren't developed till a year and a half. But there's another kind of memory called implicit memory, which is there at birth. In fact, it's there before birth, where the emotional template, the emotional pattern of your earliest experiences in your relationships are programmed into the brain. And that comes back later. You don't recall it, but you remember it. So the memory is in your body and it's in your emotions, but there's no recollection. That's called implicit memory. I'll be saying a lot more about that tonight when I talk about stress and health. What is the implicit memory of an infant who wasn't picked up when he cried? The implicit memory is that relationships are unreliable. The implicit memory is that the world is indifferent. The implicit memory is that there's no help. That's what we're structuring into our kids' brain when we don't pick them up. Now, so the first way that we attach then is through the senses. So let's now look at a 9-year-old, and many of you, I trust, have had the following experience. Your 9-year-old comes home from school, and you're really pleased to see her, because of course you haven't seen her since the morning. It's been 7 or 8 hours, they haven't laid eyes on her. So you greet her enthusiastically. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you?" "Okay." "How's school today?" "All right." "What did you learn?" "Not much." And then she goes to the next room and gets on the telephone or the internet, or she texts or emails or Twitters. Who? Her friends. In other words, the same people she just spent the whole day with. And this is when you lose it. You say, "What are you doing? You've spent the whole day with those people. You haven't seen me since the morning. And the first thing you do is you give me the cold shoulder and you get on the phone with them or you get on the email with them." Now look, if your spouse or partner came home at night, barely gave you monosyllabic answers, and as soon as they had a chance, they got on the phone and the email and contacted other people, and if you went to your friends to commiserate, what would they say to you? "Hey, sweetheart, have you tried time out?" Try some tough love. They'd say, you don't have a behavior problem, you have a relationship problem. The problem with that 9-year-old is not that she's rude, it's not that she's rejecting you consciously, not that she's trying to hurt your feelings. It's simply that her attachment has been transferred to the peer group. And the attachment instinct is telling her to physically contact the people that she's attaching to. In other words, that behavior is the acting out of an attachment instinct. There's nothing conscious about it, there's nothing deliberate about it, she's driven by her instincts. Imagine yourself when you're in love, which is a heavily charged attachment state. All you can think about is when do I see him or her? How do I get in touch with them? When will they call? You're consumed by that. That's attachment in action. Well, that's what our kids are doing. They're acting out their attachments, and we've given them the technology to do it with. They all carry their cell phones. They can all Twitter now and email, and even when they're physically not in each other's company, they can be in contact with one another, thanks to the technology that we've so generously provided them with. So that's the first way that people attach, is through the senses. Now, the second way that people instinctively attach, it comes a little bit later, is by copying, by emulation, by wanting to be the same as, by identifying. So when you're attaching with somebody, you identify with them, you want to be same as them. This is when you're immature. Mature ways of attaching allow you to hold on to your independence and your sense of self, but when you're immature, you tend to want to identify with and be the same as the people that you're attaching to. So what does that lead to? Well, when kids are attached to adults, they want to be the same as adults. They want to identify with them, so they learn from them about how to be and how to respond and all that. Well, when kids become peer attached, now they're learning the same thing instinctively from immature creatures. What a disaster. Now these days, there's a lot of hand-wringing and tearing of the roots and gnashing of the teeth about kids reading. Kids have more difficulties reading now, and they don't seem to read as much, and they don't learn to read as well. And their language seems to be a bit funny. There was the American medal winner, when she was asked what it felt like to stand on a podium representing her country, having gained this victory, she said, "I'm like, wow." Well, that's what you get when immature creatures are teaching language to one another, and that teaching is not deliberate or conscious, it's simply what happens because it's a form of attachment. It's to be the same as.